Jazz win last night. Again, they sweep the weekend series in Los Angeles. And now the question has to be asked, are the Utah Jazz a legit playoff contender in the West? And I think they absolutely are. And I think one of the more interesting parts about this Utah Jazz team is the way that they have become this contender in the West is with defense and ball movement. And it is very interesting that this team, it's not uncommon for this team to take 43s a game. And I think if you look at this team on their best nights, you're seeing ball movement that leads to an open look. And how many big shots has Malik Beasley hit? And this is why we were telling you in the summer and in the offseason after that Rudy trade, Malik Beasley's been in demand, and playoff teams are calling the Jazz on Malik Beasley. I do not think that he will be here the entire season. I continue to hear, I was talking to a guy on Saturday night about the Jazz and Jazz trades. I continue to hear Jordan Clarkson and Malik Beasley are two guys that NBA teams are calling about. And I would not be surprised to see Malik Beasley and Jordan Clarkson in trade talks. I don't know that Ryan Smith has an appetite to trade Jordan Clarkson. I don't. Would he? Sure he would. Should he? He probably should. But will he? I don't know if they have an appetite to trade Jordan Clarkson. I'm not sure. I know that Jordan likes being here a heck of a lot. But I absolutely think when trade deadline time comes, I don't think there are very many untouchables on this roster. And every game that they win, they ratchet up the tension. They ratchet up the attention. They ratchet up the possibility that they're going to force the national TV marketplace to put them on national TV games. They're going to force teams to take a much harder look at them because the Utah Jazz are 8-3. And whether you want them to be or not, they're second in the West. They just swept the Lakers and the Clippers in Los Angeles. And now the Lakers are here tonight. And guess what? The Jazz are again favored over the Lakers at Vivint Arena tonight. In a game, by the way, that's a late game. It tips at 8:15. This is no longer a fluke. This is no longer, well, we're just waiting for them to come back to earth. I think this is who the Jazz are. And I think we need to stop waiting for this team to come back to earth a little bit. That doesn't mean that they're not going to lose 5 of 7. But I also think it means that they're a lot more well-equipped than we knew they were coming into this season. And I think they're absolutely a legit 7, 8, 9, 10 team in the West.
Yeah, and I think that, depending on just how much winning you do before the trade deadline, I think that's obviously going to affect how aggressive Danny Ainge looks to be at the deadline. If you're top 5 in the West at the deadline, are you really telling me Danny Ainge isn't going to look at things a little differently? You're obviously still looking to sell. You're obviously still looking to move, Jordan Clarkson or, obviously Malik Beasley, as you were just saying. But doesn't it start to creep in what if I did this or what if I did that? What if I could get this guy or that guy and add it to this mix? What then would we be? Would that catapult us to being a top, a top 6 team in the West, staying out of the play-in and being a true playoff team? That's what I think is fascinating about this team. We can get into the minutia of Will Hardy and how he goes about it, or Colin Sexton being a great 6-man so far. We can get into all that, but I think in the big picture, the really fascinating thing to me is where is this team at come February? Because if they're top 5 in February, that's going to be crazy times, because that makes Danny Ainge's life a little more difficult. If you're a play-in team in February, then the decision is obvious. And so to me, it's like Jordan Clarkson's clearly going to have value. Malik Beasley's going to have value. Lauri Markkanen already has value. So you're going to get the calls. My thing is just, what path are you going to take? Are you going to, go left, or are you going to go right? And if you do go right and you do trade these guys and you do trade what you have now for draft capital, how do you turn that draft capital into something tangible? Because the more you win, the more your fan base is going to be like, hey, well, why did we trade these guys away? Right? Not that Danny Ainge probably cares about that, but I could just see that conversation building very quickly if this team continues to win at the rate that they're winning at. I think it makes his life more difficult. It
does make his life more difficult, but I think it's always the same question. Is this a championship caliber team?
Yeah.
And I think overwhelmingly right now the answer is no. I don't know that anybody looks at this Jazz team the way that they are constructed and says, yeah, this is a team that can win a championship, because I just don't think that that's the case. I don't think they're built to be an NBA championship team. They're not the Golden State Warriors. They're not the Phoenix Suns. They're not the Denver Nuggets. They're not the Milwaukee Bucks. You just can't. To me, those teams are just more talented, and each of those teams have 1 and 2 superstars on them. Like, I don't know how if you're Golden State, you're playing as poorly as you are, but I wouldn't expect that to continue. I look at the East. Let's say somehow the Jazz come out of the West and they win the Western Conference Finals. Are you better than Boston in a 7-game series? Are you better than Philly in a 7-game series? Maybe. Are you better than Milwaukee? Not the way the Bucks have been playing. I don't think you are. I mean, and again, I just look at the major contenders in the East. I mean, every contender in the East outside of, I would think Boston and Milwaukee has a major flaw. Like you look at my Chicago Bulls, like, why did you pay Zach LaVine? I will just go back and say again, because I don't know how many people pay attention to it. Zach LaVine's missing games with a knee injury again. He has right knee swelling, I think is what they call it.
We get it.
And you look at the East, and the Chicago Bulls are 5-6 because they're missing the guy that they paid all that money, right? But you look at the standings, look at the Cleveland Cavaliers. Tell me right now that the Cleveland Cavaliers aren't a championship caliber basketball team.
That's every day.
That's arguably the best team in the NBA right now. Now, it's 9 games, right? I think, aren't they 8-1? Yeah, they're 8-1. It's 9 games, and they're going to have to go and prove that they can win the way they've been winning for 50 games.
Yeah.
But the way they play basketball, Darius Garland or not, they're winning games. Donnie's averaging 30 points a game, right? You're young, you're fast, you're big, you're really good defensively somehow.
Yeah.
But you look at Milwaukee, Milwaukee's given up 101 points a game. In the 2022-23 NBA season, them Wolves MFers are giving up 101 points a game. How are you going to score on them? Like, that's a really good defensive team. And by the way, Cleveland's at 103.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Yet you look at the Jazz, they're giving up 111. They're just not in that class of championship caliber teams in the East. That's the hard part. And I think now, again, and I think this is really important because I already see the comments about why we traded Don. You traded Don to get Markkanen and Sexton and draft picks. We need to stop going back to, hey, but if we hadn't traded Don. Well, because if you hadn't traded Don, Laurie and Sexton wouldn't be here. And those two guys right now, Colin Sexton and Laurie Markkanen, whether you want to embrace it or not, and I think most Jazz fans have embraced it with Laurie, but I'm telling you now, Colin Sexton's one of the most important guys on this team. What he's giving you off the bench, the speed, the pace, the quickness, his ability to get to the basket. Last night, that one drive, that dribble drive was, that's the stuff that you love watching with him. Like, yes. I just, for my money, but I look at the West. I don't know who the best team in the West is. And I think in the framework of, are the Jazz a championship contending team? Are they one of the teams in the West that you can sit here today on November 7th? Are the Utah Jazz one of the teams that we can sit here and say that's a team that can win the Western Conference Finals?
No.
No, I don't think you can. If we're just being honest, no, the answer is no. Because I think Denver's better. I don't know what to make of Dallas at this point. Dallas feels like Luka he just sucks the love out of the game for everybody but himself.
They are who we thought they were, as the saying goes, right? It's
I think
Luka
so.
And everybody else.
I think they're going to score a lot, but they're going to give up a lot. And at some point, you have to be able to stop people.
Yeah.
And I don't think in the clutch they can. But if I look at the West right now, the teams I think could win the Western Conference Finals, obviously the Phoenix Suns. Devin Booker's a sex machine. It just is what it is. The Memphis Grizzlies, the Denver Nuggets, and I still, out of some just probably, I don't know, self-deprecating hate, think the LA Clippers can win the West.
What are you, nuts?
Kawhi's got to prove he can stay healthy. This knee apparently has been really frustrating for him.
Yep.
And I think we've seen this across this league. When you're coming off of a major knee procedure, it takes time.
But this is why the Colin Sexton thing is so enjoyable because he is obviously coming off of a knee and yet he is still doing what he's doing. And I do think that what's interesting, if you make kind of a crazy comparison, like you look at Colin's process versus Kawhi's, like Colin's a young guy that's just out there letting it rip. Like, hey, I don't have anything to lose. Like, I'm on a new team. I'm coming off the bench as a sixth man. My team needs me. Like, let's just go and do this thing. And it's like Kawhi is notorious for being Mr. Load Management, Mr. I need to miss all these games, and I got to make sure I only play like 20 minutes a night. And like, that's who he's always been. So I don't know. I just, they're not a championship caliber team very clearly, but I think it just plays on the emotional strings of fans when, you're able to beat the Clippers, or you're able to run the Lakers out of the building, or you're able to make Luka's life, really difficult. You're able to, like the Memphis wins were crazy because you beat them without Ja, you beat them with Ja, and you're like, damn, like how far can this team go? That's what I think people are having trouble with. But you have to be able to see that that's a regular season game. That's not a 7-game series where a team and a head coach and an organization is going to pick you apart. That's what makes 7-game series so difficult, is they're going to say, okay, yeah, we know that Vando can't shoot the three at a really high clip, so we're going to sag off of him, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do that. Like, you're just catching teams on a nightly basis right now. So, again, just enjoy the ride.
That's true.
Like, enjoy the ride.
Yeah, you just got to enjoy the ride. I don't know. Jake Dane says, Clippers, that's a bad take, LOL. Well, if Kawhi's healthy, I think they're the best team in the West.
Dude, Paul George was terrorizing the Jazz last night. Can we just get that out there? Like what he did in the first half was ridiculous.
I know Jazz fans hate him, but they're a 500 team without their best player. And listen, I understand that they're beating teams like Houston, and well, that's all well and good. But I look at that team and I just again point to you that the Clippers did not have John Wall, right? The Clippers did not have Kawhi Leonard if you put those two guys in the lineup full time, right? But you look at Paul George last night, 5 of 14 from 3, and he still scores 34 points. He's just that guy. He's able to get those numbers, but they're good enough that they only lose by 8 starting Markieff Morris, Ivica Zubac, Reggie Jackson, Paul George, and Terrence Mann. And playing, John Wall off the bench last night, 28 minutes. He's coming off the bench for them.
Yeah.
Playing 28 minutes. So you don't have him as a starter. You have him off the bench, and he gives you 12 points and 6 dimes and 3 rebounds. Like, when they get all of that lined out, and you put Kawhi there, you put John Wall there, you're not, when you're not starting Reggie Jackson and you insert John Wall and now Reggie Jackson, because I think, and I know we've debated this on the show, Reggie Jackson's a great guard off the bench.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's a starting point guard.
I think he's done yeoman's work starting for them. He's not a starting point guard.
He's just not that guy right now. I think he's lost his mojo as a starter and with John Wall there, and it's an adjustment. He's a veteran guy that, let's be honest about Reggie Jackson for the Clippers. Like, he's been one of their most important players over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he has hit big shot after big shot for them. And now you're probably not that guy anymore on that team. Right? So it's just, I don't think we know who the Clippers are yet. And yeah, maybe I'm completely wrong. You may be well right about that, Jake. I could be completely wrong, Jake Dane. I don't know. Joe Oliver said John Wall played last night as a off the bench though. Yeah. And granted, he played 28 minutes. This is the Colin Sexton thing. You're playing starters minutes. Although 28 minutes, really, if you're playing 30 minutes or more, you're playing starters minutes. But I think they're trying to be careful with him as well.
Yeah.
I know at some point you have to be who you are. You have to be who you are. It's just, the West is a very interesting space right now. Because when you look at the best teams, I think most people would argue the Jazz and the Suns have been the 2 best teams in the West.
Yeah, definitely gotten off to the best starts.
Right, yeah, I think that's exactly right. I mean, the Lakers, the Rockets.
I just don't think anyone has faith in the Lakers anymore. Like, everyone knows they got names, but it's just troubling that they just can't. Like, it's not just Westbrook anymore, man. Like, at some point,
he's actually playing really well for them.
He did play well last night.
Off the bench.
Yeah.
And was it can't remember. I think it was against the Jazz where he scored 26 points.
Yeah, I believe it was. Yeah.
I mean, he played really well for them the other night.
Yeah, and I think, like last night in these last couple of games, his shot selection's been a lot better. He understands that if he can just get to the basket, his odds of having good numbers go way up. If he stops relying on that jumper and just like, hey, I'm going to use my physicality and my vertical to get into bigs and get fouled and try to finish, like, that's his game right now, and I don't know what his future holds. I don't know,
no idea.
Like, I don't know if he gets another shot with another team, or if this is it, or like, that's really difficult to see. But I do think what you could say about Russ is that dude is willing to do whatever his team asks.
But he's not Kyrie. He's not.
I would take Russ over Kyrie right now.
Kyrie is just radioactive. Like I
Yeah.
don't think you can have Kyrie on your team.
No.
Right. I mean, and it's now like I was hearing last night that. Joe Tsai was ready to hire Ime Udoka, and now he's gotten pressure not to do it. So they haven't hired Ime Udoka. Like that situation seems problematic. Oh, by the way, they're better without Kyrie. Look how good Kevin Durant was the other night without Kyrie. I don't know. It's interesting. But is Golden State a 3-7 team?
Obviously not.
Come on. They played a lot of basketball. You want to talk about a team that needs a trade. The Golden State Warriors need a trade. But right now, I mean, the entire West is within 6.5 games of each other.
Yeah.
Even the 1-9 Houston Rockets at their worst record in the West is 6.5 out. So it'll just be interesting. Did I say John Wall didn't play last night? I see everybody commenting. If I did, I apologize.
What you said was no John Wall. And everyone was like, oh, well, John Wall played. Like, now, what he was saying is that John Wall didn't start. He came off the bench. That's,
Even without Kawhi, they're not. My point is, even without Kawhi, they're not starting John Wall.
Without Kawhi, without a full-time John Wall, right? Without a John Wall that's starting and leading the offense and doing what John Wall does, no Kawhi, no John Wall in that sense. They're still doing what they're doing. That's the point.
Yeah, I think I don't know who the best team in the West is right now.
My opinion's always been the West is better than the East, and I don't think that we ever know who the best team in the West is until you're 20 or 30 games in. Like this Cam Johnson thing, like you look at where the Warriors are at with some of the stuff they're dealing with, like you know who the names are. You know that Memphis is better than the Jazz, and they just didn't play better, right? Like you know that they're a better team. I just think that you need more games under your belt so that teams can establish themselves more. That's, and the other thing is too in the West, like, and I know we gotta get to football 50, but the other thing in the West is that the teams evolve and find their footing. So like in the East, you know their situation. Those teams are always going to be what they're going to be. Like, that Boston's always going to disappoint you in the NBA Finals. You know that Brooklyn's always going to have issues. You know that it's Giannis and everybody else. In the West, it's a totally different situation. So I would just tell you, give it some time in the West.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. By the